Welcome to the Long Thread podcast about spinning, stitching, and weaving by hand. The podcast is presented by Long Thread Media, publishers of Spin-Off, Handwoven, Piecework, and Little Looms magazines. Find us online at longthreadmedia.com. I'm your host, Long Thread Media co-founder Anne Merrow. Even before I was a knitter, spinner, and weaver, I loved books, and I'm not alone, judging from both the stacks of books at Yarn Barn of Kansas and the crafters lingering to flip through the treasures there. So I'm especially delighted to be starting a series of episodes with Susan Bateman and Melissa Parsons about books that Yarn Barn's staff and readers especially love. I think of the first episode as Every Crafter Needs This Book. So Melissa and Susan, you are there in the offices of Yarn Barn of Kansas, and we are going to talk about some of your favorite books. And I think about books and Yarn Barn as just this paradise with all kinds of different books on the shelves. Can you tell me, since I know that both of you do all these crafts, tell me about some of your favorite books and also how you got into this. Susan, do you want to start as you started Yarn Barn of Kansas?
Sure. My degree is in textile design and weaving, and I didn't think I would be a good enough artist, but I really, really enjoyed the art, the craft of it. And so I wanted to do something that would help perpetuate weaving. And so I opened up the store many, many years ago. And here we are, still going strong. And over the years, we always had some books. But we have been fortunate enough to get more and more and more books and more skills, including knitting and crocheting and spinning and so forth, to add to the collection. I shouldn't say collection. We have a collection of books. Many of those are out of print, but we are very much try our darndest to keep the newest titles coming, the older titles that are still available for everybody, because there is value in all of those books.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have a degree in interior design. But as part of completing that degree, I took some weaving classes. And at that point, I was like, oh, I've made a mistake. And then I realized weaving was what I was really interested in, much more than actually interior design. So shortly after graduating, I came here to Yarn Barn to learn about weaving more and just kind of settled in.
So this episode, we're going to talk about the books that every crafter should have in a variety of different categories. So whether you're a small loom weaver, harness weaver, or a knitter, crocheter, spinner, or just somebody who loves textiles in general, we're going to talk about the books available today that you must have. But let's start by talking about a book that you mentioned out of print. And in weaving and in all of these crafts, there are often books that are the one that got away. And so we have some news.
Yay! Yes, we're excited.
So the news is that Marguerite Porter Davidson's book, just sort of affectionately known as the Green Book, but it's this, I don't own a copy of this book. So why don't you tell me about the Green Book? And then we can talk about the future of the Green Book.
Well, it's 4 harnesses, and it really delves into a wide range of different draft styles, pattern styles. The age of the book shows that there is a lot of overshot in it, but also you have summer and winter, you have twills, you have some plain weave variations. You really have a little bit of everything. And that book has been on the market forever. And when it went out, there was suddenly this void of just a really good 4 harness pattern book.
Yeah, it's one of those books where it's just drafts, so there's almost no text it doesn't discuss what makes overshot or what makes it different from summer and winter. But just as a resource for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drafts, from very simple to elaborate and complex, but all accomplishable with just 4 harnesses, man, when that book went out of print, it was a heartbreaker. Because we were still telling people it's out of print, but there are copies out there. And it just meant that people were having to go online and get copies that the contents were great, but the book had a torn cover or a weird smell or, who knows what. But when we heard that book was coming back, we were over the moon.
Yeah.
And we just can't say enough. So people, if you don't have that book and you're about to pull the trigger on eBay, wait.
So what is the official name of the book?
Hold on, let me grab it.
See, your copy is never far away from you.
No,
That's
exactly.
right.
It is within arm's reach. A Hand Weaver's Pattern Book. And this particular one that we have is from 2002, the 31st printing. The 31st printing.
Wow.
If you have any doubts about how important this book has been to weavers, the 31st printing was November 2002.
And we should add that it's not just that there's a new printing of it. There's been a project that's been kept under wraps for years, affectionately called The Big Weave, where a number of weavers and Osterhaug and folks at Glamacra and Madeline Vanderhoot and a whole other team of folks have come together to not only reissue the book, but create contemporary drafts, because the old ones were quite simple, black and white. I think they might have even been hand-drawn, right?
Yeah,
they were.
The grid itself was not, but then little hash marks.
Little hash marks. And they're going to be entirely rewoven in color, and it's going to come out from Schiffer Publishing, I think, in 2027. And people will definitely be hearing a lot more about it. But we are so excited that we can finally share this news. I know you guys are thrilled that you can have it in the store.
Yes, we are thrilled. And I would say if there is a criticism of the earlier versions of the book, the photography wasn't great, kind of grainy black and white photographs. But to hear that they're going to be all new photos, that's exciting.
Yeah. It's been a big project, and I know that they're gratified to know that folks are excited to have it.
Yeah.
So for weavers who are getting started now, or who are looking for the book they have to have right now, what are your go-to weaving books for multi-shaft weavers these days?
I think Susan and I are both in agreement that for a beginning weaver who just needs an all-around reference for getting started and then taking them a little bit along the path so that they're feeling competent, Deborah Chandler's Learning to Weave just can't be beat.
That's a classic.
Yeah. She shows both front to back, which is how warping, which is what we prefer here at the Yarn Barn. But she also gives a section on back to front. So and then she goes into, here's a quick first time sample that you can make. And then here's another simple project you can make. So it takes you step by step through the warping board to the threading on the loom, and then even continues on to help you do one or two other little things.
Yeah, and it's black and white photography, which is fine, but it also has a lot of diagrams, kind of illustrations of the path a yarn should take, or when something's not quite right, what will it look like? So those kinds of drawings I think are really helpful too, as you're kind of wading in and trying to figure out what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong.
And Deb had a column early on in Handwoven called Your Weaving Teacher, or Your Hand Weaving Teacher, where for many issues she would, explain some issue. We actually still have them in the Handwoven magazine online issues, but that she went and created this sort of comprehensive weaving book that still stands. I think that they revised it maybe 10 or 15 years ago to include more material, but she put so much in there.
Yeah, I think at that time is when they added the back to front. Previous to that, it had just been front to back. But yeah, super useful. Anyone who's learning on a 4-harness loom, I think this is a great book.
Also, I think that for those that don't have access to getting the book, that you can find it sometimes in most libraries.
Yeah, this one is one that's widely available in libraries, I would say. Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. We had a kind of a runner-up or an honorable mention. Peggy Osterkamp's An Illustrated Guide, Weaving for Beginners, is extremely thorough.
Particularly on back to front.
Yeah, so if you're a back to front weaver or think you want to be a back to front weaver, this is an excellent reference for you. But it's a pretty huge and thick book. So for some people, it might be a little bit overwhelming or intimidating, but it does have a ton of good information as well.
Susan's holding it up and it's about 2.5 inches thick.
It is spiral, which is nice, but it is comprehensive, but it definitely leans towards back to front versus front to back.
Now, remind me, back to front and front to back, which is the one that takes a rattle and which is the one, I can never remember which is which.
The back to front takes a rattle.
Okay. And both of those are if you've taken a weaving class and you need a refresher, or, you know, for folks who are really out there trying to do it on their own, or if you need middle of the night weaving by your loom companion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There is another book that we would recommend for people who have an 8 harness loom. And it is basically the 8 harness version of the Marguerite Davison book that we just talked about. And it's a weaver's book of 8 shaft patterns from the Friends of Handwoven, edited by Carol Strickler. And I think what I like about it is kind of the same thing I like about the Marguerite Davison book, is that you can just leaf through it and then find a picture that attracts you, or find a picture that kind of piques your interest.
Of the weaving itself.
Of the weaving itself, yeah. It's not, there aren't any projects. It doesn't tell you how to make something out of it, but it's just such a great starting point. I can't tell you how many projects we've woven here at the store using this as our starting point. I think it does have a little bit more information maybe than the Davison book about the particular structure. And it is organized by structure, you know, twills, overshots, M's and O's, whatever. But one of the ways I evaluate how much I like a book is, you know, these books I can look at all day long if I wanted to. But this is a book that early on, I purchased to have at home when I needed it, you know, for my planning at home. So absolutely, if you've got 8 harnesses, I would recommend getting this one.
And that book also has a story. At Handwoven, Linda Ligon, I'm not sure who cooked up the idea, but Linda Ligon worked with Carol Strickler, who was a member of the Boulder Handweavers Guild. And, you know, kind of like the Big Weave, mustered a group to weave samples and create all these elements and bring it together. And it was a kind of a race across the finish line, because unfortunately, Carol Strickler passed away either right as the book was published or very shortly thereafter. So, but I think it means a lot that her name is associated with this book that she put so much into and that people find so useful. It means a lot for weavers to kind of live on like that. And I feel very lucky. I have shuttle that I bought from the Boulder Handweavers Guild, and in the bottom it says Strickler, and that is a treasure. It actually doesn't work very well for any of my looms, but I just keep it. So that's for 4 and 8. I tend to be more of a rigid heddle weaver. So what do you think I should have on my shelf?
Well, we have 2 favorites, and we kind of went head to head, kind of competition wise, to see which one we thought maybe could pull ahead. I think they're both excellent books, and if you have one or the other, I don't know that I think you need to pick up the other one that you don't have. But the 2 books that we had in competition with one another were the Ashford book of Rigid Heddle Weaving and Inventive Weaving on a Little Loom.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Ashford book by Rowena Hart and Inventive Weaving by Stein Mitchell. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Stein Mitchell. And they're both excellent books, but Susan.
Yeah, on the if you need a lot of pictures to show you exactly how to thread the loom and so forth, I think the Rigid Heddle weaving book from Ashford is really good. They have tons of step by step pictures of how to thread the loom. So you can't miss being able to do it from that book. And then it continues on and does give some small projects and some technique things like on tapestry or surface design by manipulating threads. But the really plus thing about this book is that the directions for threading is just incredible.
Well, and you said This is the book that kind of put direct warping on the map.
Oh, yeah,
right?
it is. I think it kind of was invented by someone in Sweden, and I don't remember the person's name, but Ashford actually really got us going on that.
Is somebody calling to order books and yarn? When you own a yarn store. Yes, those Ashford, those photographs and those instructions are really terrific.
Yeah. Like Susan said, you cannot miss if you follow those instructions. But we love inventive weaving on a little loom also. And it also has good instructions for getting started. I think this book, maybe its subtitle is Discover the Full Potential of the Rigid Heddle Loom. And I think that seems fair. Projects that are designed specifically to teach you a specific technique or skill or style or something like that. And I think that's interesting. And I think the thing that I especially love is there's a section called Tech Support when things go wrong. And it's just so thorough. And it's just talking about things that you might not even know you're making a mistake. But then when you see, oh, frowning warp, yeah, my warp does frown. Then you realize, oh, that's something I can fix. And, it's interesting because we talk to a lot of people who live in areas where they don't have other weavers around. So they are really on their own. And I think there are a lot of cases where they don't realize that something's not right. They just think, well, it's just not working that well. But then they don't realize that, oh, that's fixable. And I think that section of this book is just dynamite because it really does just catch you on all sorts of things you could be doing that could be better. So I love that about this book.
And every project actually gives you a new thing, technique, or skill to create that project. So it's not just a page of just a picture of how to. It's a page that drives you through doing technique to do into a finished product.
Yeah, I think that book really pushes the idea of what the limitations are in a little loom. You don't have to do the hardest thing there is. You don't have to weave with 3 heddles on a rigid heddle loom. But if you want to learn how to do Theo-Mormon weaving, which is typically a 4-shaft, I think, at least technique. And if you want to learn to do that on your on your Cricut, I think on your Cricut, but certainly on your rigid heddle loom, Sign Mitchell will teach you how to do that. It's amazing.
We have about 160 different weaving titles in our collection. Thank you, Jim. Yep, yes. And I don't mean like on Susan's personal shelf.
No, this is
titles that we sell.
And that's just weaving?
Just weaving, yeah.
That's amazing. When I see you guys at shows, I think you have brought a not insubstantial number of those with you. So they're in the store, they're online. And if those things trees are pieces of wood. You are basically carrying logs.
Well, if you pick up the book boxes, that's true.
Yes,
that's true.
And as we're getting older, the book boxes are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. There are more of them, but they're smaller.
But I know that whenever people come, they want to see what's new on the shelf. So let's turn to knitting. If you are a knitter, a beginner or at any level of knitter, what is your take on the book that you must have?
Hands down, we both voted for Vogue Knitting.
That was my first too.
Yep. When I first started at Yarn Barn, as I said, I could knit a scarf, but I didn't know anything about shaping, and customers would come in and expect me to help them. And there were so many times that the reason I was able to help them was I would say, okay, I don't know, let's just go look at the Vogue Knitting book and find, oh, here's how you do a slip knit, or here's how you do that particular increase that you need to do, or this is what that abbreviation means, and here's how you do it. For me, it just made it possible to go from scarf to sweater to actually being able to help people. So yeah, owe a lot to this book. And I was flipping through it, thinking about what was it about this book that made it so easy? Why did I keep going to this book instead of the other books? And so I just flipped through and to the section on decreases. So it shows a basic left slanting decrease, basic right slanting decrease, then 3 variations on those 2, and then double left slanting. But the way that it's organized, I think is its genius. So there's a actual photograph of the fabric made using that decrease, and all of the decreases are done with the exact same yarn, the exact same color. The only thing that's changing is the type of decrease, so you can see how they compare one to the other. Why would you want to use this decrease instead of that decrease? And then there's a series of diagrams that show you how to do it, and those are, big, good illustrations, and that's all super. And then at the bottom of each page, they have references, basically like quick listings of other things that are related to this idea, so that if you're reading this and you get to the bottom and you're like, well, I think I understand. But at the bottom, here's a little thing that explains how to go to page 46 to learn how to slip a stitch. And so you don't even have to flip back to the index to kind of pick up what you might have missed. And so I think, and this book goes from those very beginnings, techniques, all the way up to complicated things like, why would you choose this type of sleeve shaping instead of that type of sleeve shaping, and how does that affect how the sweater hangs, and what yarn would be best with this kind or that kind. So for me, this one just hits it out of the park. There was a second book that we talked about, one that's been around for about 1 million years, and this was one of our longtime teachers' favorite books, and that is The Principles of Knitting by June Hemmons Hyatt. And it has 712 pages, and these are pretty densely packed with text. There is not much white space here. So this thing is a beast, and it is full of information.
Probably leans more towards those people that are more skilled or more advanced. The illustrations, there's still some illustrations, but not on the depth that you get in the Vogue knitting. So for the professional person wanting to do, like here, purl left, double decrease, and so forth, it's all in here. It's more written out than visually shown. But you can tell from the text what you're supposed to do. There's no picture necessarily that will verify that you've just done it correctly. Lots of text, lots of information, but probably more for the more advanced.
Yeah.
There really is a theme here, because that's a book that was around for a long time and disappeared, and then June Hemmons Hyatt revised it. So there is a theme here where these books that we're talking about are the classics that everybody comes back to, and that revisited and updated and improved.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we want to look at crochet next?
Absolutely.
I am not a crocheter. So Susan and I went to our staff and who are excellent crocheters, and said, when someone comes in, what do you recommend? What is the best get to know crochet type book? And they gave us 2 titles. And this is interesting because while I'd say like the 2 knitting titles we just talked about are pretty similar to one another, these 2 books are actually pretty different from one another.
Right. One is a very simple book called How to Crochet, Learn the Basic Stitches and Techniques by Sarah Delaney. And it's almost like it's a very small book, but it really does, and it's black and white, but it really does have a lot of information about the basics to get going. Not a project book. It's truly, how do I do this stitch and that stitch? But it's very straightforward, and the text even. It's not super fine text either, but it really tells you how to get started. I mean, to actually crochet.
Yeah.
The other one is called The Crocheter Skill Building Workshop, and that's by Dora
Ornstein.
It is in color, and it gives you just some fun stuff.
Yeah, it does have the basics, the very basics, but not in depth, maybe just more as a little bit of a refresher. But this excels in the intermediate crochet level, but it has tons of techniques and methods for just taking your crocheting up to that next level, or even the level after that. And it has tons of pictures, which are great. Tons of techniques that maybe you didn't even know existed, but are, great to have in your toolkit. It's interesting, though. The one thing that I think is a little bit puzzling about this book, and I don't think I just missed it. I looked through this book very thoroughly. Almost every sample they show, they give both the written out instructions and the chart. And while there's a glossary for the chart, there's not really an explanation for how to read a chart. So if you already know how to read a chart and that's your preference, you're covered here. If you don't and you'd like to be, this maybe isn't the book that's going to teach you that, but it will teach you so many other things that it is just a great source.
I think charts are a big subject of discussion among crocheters because some people love them, that they're visual, that they look like the finished work. And some people, for some reason, find them really, difficult to understand those symbols. And crochet is so visual. I think a lot of people look at it and figure out how to do it. So that chart debate.
Yeah.
Both of these books, the simple How to Crochet book, is definitely a smaller book, and the price points are very good on it. Some of these other books that we've described, they are very comprehensive, and they are in color, which all adds to the cost of the book printing. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Like, if you compare the price of the Vogue Knitting to Principles of Knitting, there's a big gap there. And so you think, well, is that $20 or $30 or $40 on some of these between our, two choices? That's yarn I won't be buying, or that's yarn I will be buying. So it is something to consider when you're thinking about it.
So how about spinning? What do you recommend for spinners?
Well, I think that the Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs by Sarah Anderson is just a must-have for spinners if they want to explore different types of spins and truly understand what twist and grist and so forth mean. It's very well done, good pictures, it's in color, and the subtitle actually is Techniques for Creating 80 Yarns, and that's the honest to goodness truth.
Yeah.
Melissa and I didn't notice this until we were just reviewing each of these books here. And Melissa came across.
I'm always so excited when there's some little thing that comes out or tucks into an envelope or, some little bonus thing. And this book has 64 cards that are in the back of the book that are kind of reference cards. So if you're going to like a spin-in or a workshop or something and you don't really want to add the 2 pounds that this book is, it's probably not 2 pounds, but £1.5 that this book is, you can take these little cards and they encapsulate the technique. They have a picture of what the yarn looks like. Just wonderful just a little bonus. And I love stuff like that.
So that's kind of like if you're trying to remember, what are the twists I should have in a boucle? Is it 2 S's and a Z, or in which way does it go?
Yep, exactly. And then there were a couple other things that I just marked because I just these are things that made me kind of love this book. So one of the things is, this is by Sarah Anderson. And one of the things I love is that she's tried all of these things that she's writing about. And sometimes it's a big flop, or sometimes
Yes.
we're learning from her experience. So here she's talking about, she was trying to felt some singles. And she said, when I came back to it, the yarn had felted enough that it stuck together in the ball. It was still usable, but there was no way the ball would roll away from me while knitting because I had to unstick each length of yarn before using it. So, it's so great to just hear, that happens to other people too. So here, this is in the section called Spiral Yarns. And so each page kind of has its own little heading that has a picture of the skein and then close-ups of what each single looks like, and then what the yarn looks like once it's been spun. But it also has text. And in this case, it says, when knitted, these bumps tend to interlock with each other, making a more durable fabric. For this reason, many spinners use this yarn construction for socks. And so here it is, not just telling you, this is what the yarn looks like, but it tells you how to make it. But then more importantly, why would you make it? Why learn this? And here's why.
One of the things I love about that book, if you look at the front, it might seem like it's just an art yarn book or a designer yarn book.
Right.
But it's, you mentioned understanding and controlling grist and twist. And there are things in there like opposing ply yarns, which can be very smooth yarns. And those are not really lumpy, bumpy art yarns or fuzzy textured. And she also did a study with chain plied yarns, because there's the old debate about whether chain plied yarns are durable. And so she made 2 pairs of socks, and only Sarah Anderson has the control to make 2 pairs of socks that are so similar, except for one was chain plied and one was 3-ply. And she was careful. She alternated which foot she put them on. She wore them equal amounts. She washed them the same, and they wore out on the same day. She got a hole the very same day to see which one was going to get a hole first. And so she discovered that they both got a hole on the same day.
Yes, but then that story goes on, because then there's a follow-up. She knits 2 more pairs of socks and continues her testing. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I love this person. And I found why I'd marked this other page. And I think it comes down to the tone of the writing and the warmth that it exudes. So if I can, let me just read this real quickly. This is under Super Coil with beaded pigtails. And so she writes, now here's a variation that is really fun, almost to the point of ridiculous. I affectionately name skeins of this yarn, Take Me to Your Leader, because when wound in the skein, the little beaded pigtails remind me of alien eyeballs. Before attempting this one, you may want to read up on beaded pigtails on page 220. I wouldn't say this yarn is really hard to execute. There's just a lot going on at one time. Since we're talented and determined spinners, we can do it. And it just feels like here's a friend who's just sitting right next to me saying this into my ear. I just loved it. So,
and then the other part is fiber. Mm-hmm. So we have the Fleece and Fiber source book by Deborah Robinson and Carol Acarias. Mm-hmm. And this book, my word, 200 different animals, breeds, and information about them. She also gives you like fleece weight, the staple length, the fiber diameter, the lock characteristics, the different natural colors you can get, and talks about what the fiber is considered suitable for either sweaters or maybe a rug. Really goes into the detail on that.
Well, and I'm a sucker for a book that picks a structure and then just does that same thing over and over again, because it makes it so easy to compare two things. And let's face it, 2 kinds of wool are more similar to each other than they are to wool or rayon, for example. So when they're comparing 2 things that are so similar, using this kind of template to go through so that you can really just look at 2 things and compare them, I think is so useful. Also, they've got, in so many cases, pictures of fleece, pictures of yarn spun with it, and then many times something that's knitted out of it or crocheted out of it. So you see it in use. And so I love that. And this was just an example I looked up. This yarn, I just kind of picked a breed, Badger-Faced Welsh Mountain. So it talks about it. And Susan already mentioned this, but one of the things I think makes this book useful for more than just spinners. So recently there have been people who are knitters, but they're really interested in breed-specific yarn. And so this book has information for them for example, this Badger-Faced Welsh Mountain breed. This book lists knitting, crocheting, and weaving. So why would you pick this? And it says, no, you will end up with a firm texture and a solid fabric that is likely to be too rough for next to the skin wear, although a 26 to 30 micron fleece with minimal kemp might work well for everyday garments. So it steers you away from things that are going to be a disaster, or steers you towards something that ultimately is going to give you the qualities that you want. So for people who are weaving, not necessarily spinners, but looking for interesting yarns, maybe, at conferences like Maryland Sheep and Wool, where they are exposed to breeds they're not familiar with, having a book like this that they can refer to is just so useful.
And I would say that today, that probably more spinners are spinning for knitting than they are for weaving.
Do you think that's changed over years?
I do. I think it used to be more that handcraft of weaving fit more in with the fact that the yarn was actually prepared by hand in spinning. But I think now it's kind of changed, that knitters and crocheters are finding the rabbit hole on spinning.
Well, we certainly are seeing more and more knitting yarns that are marketing their breed as an asset.
Yes.
Yeah.
And U.S. Produced wool product is very significant, and which we feel personally strongly about.
Yeah.
And that's another book that was a great endeavor. Although I think, Deb Robeson did a great deal of that work herself, and just seeing how she washed all that yarn and in her bathtub. And she has a fleece library where if you ask her for a wool, she can go into a banker's box and pull out a plastic bag that has a lock or two of that yarn classified by name.
Oh, wow. That is
the effort and organization that it took to create that book. And she worked on it for a number of years, and also included some other fiber. We mostly know it as a wool book, but there's, alpaca and goat.
Yes, there are others. Yes. And the other thing is that it was so popular that not only can you get the big book of the Fleece and Fiber Source Book, but they have a field guide to fiber, a small version of this that probably don't include all of the exotic sheep breeds, but it makes it available really to all individuals that would be interested in it.
And as a true field guide, if you're going to Maryland, you can actually put that in your bag.
That's right. Yeah. And it doesn't weigh 3 pounds.
Well, I think that is a great list of things to add to your own shelf, or to, make sure to request. For my copy of Vogue Knitting was a gift from a friend when I was learning how to knit. So the nice thing about, giving these things as gifts is that people will probably keep them and think of you forever.
That's right.
That's right. Yes,
that is right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am going to go find the copies of these books that I don't already have. And thank you guys for being part of this our very first book chat here about, the books every crafter should have. And we are going to come back with more kind of fun groupings of books. I think our next one is going to be on kind of oddballs and rare books and things people might not know about, and the treasures that you wouldn't know about if you were only going to a local general bookstore. So we will look forward to that soon.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for having us. And we look forward to all of the reading that we have to do, too, to give our opinions on.
That's right. Good. Thanks to Yarn Barn of Kansas for sponsoring this series. I can't wait to continue our book conversation and introduce you to books that are classics, new, or new to you. Till next time. Thank you for listening to the Long Thread Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again.